You join me outside the usual formula for Gauge the Issue because I'd like to take this opportunity to pay my respects. On the 25th of June 2023, the Wolsztyn Experience in Poland announced the passing of their founder member, Howard Jones MBE. Now, it's easy to get sentimental for the passing of many people in railway preservation. You know, Fred Dibner, Bernard Holden, Alan Pegler, Jim Rinn and so on. And for good reason, these guys have done great things for railway pres. But what Howard managed to undertake was something so fantastic and complicated to explain that it's hard to believe that he managed to pull it off at all. You see, by the early 1990s, you could still travel behind working steam in Poland. Now, when I say working steam, I don't mean a little tank engine pottering backwards and forwards along a demonstration line at a steam centre, or a big mainline Pacific running the occasional rail tour a handful of times a year. I'm talking about daily, revenue-earning, timetabled, steam-hauled services that are being run either for a national or local network for part of a local or national economy. Now, the main reason why Poland was still using steam by the early 90s was because it was part of what used to be the Soviet Union. Put simply, communism strangled prosperity, so economies were poorer, investment was lackluster, and existing technology that was already run into the ground had to keep being run into the ground. The most modern steam engines on the Polish railways were already 40 years old by this point, and the majority of operations were being worked out of the small town of Wolsztyn, about 70 miles from the border with Germany. So, what did Howard Jones have to do with it? You see, around this time, Howard and his brother Trevor helped to organise a series of trips to Poland for readers of Steam Railway magazine. And using his experience of diplomacy and local knowledge, Howard managed to set up an organisation that would not only pay for the maintenance of the engines in Wolsztyn, but would offer something that nowhere else in the world has offered before or since.
In conjunction with the local authorities and PKP, we've formed a charitable trust in Poland to concentrate on maintaining the active loco fleet on the main line in Wolsztyn, and the charitable trust will administer the funds as to what they're spent on to keep the fleet operating the way it is right now. The funds will come from the UK from shareholders who will, in exchange for funding the operation, be provided with accommodation in Wolsztyn and driving experience courses for the next 5 years. They'll get 1 week a year for the next 5 years.
The long and short is that Howard and his associates enabled paying members of the public the chance to drive regular scheduled steam services on the main line at mainline speeds. Now, obviously running steam on the main line had been a thing in the UK for 25 years or so by this point, and in recent years the Jacobite service has technically been advertised in the working timetable at wayside stations. But for those trains, you couldn't just pay a few pounds and jump on at any wayside station you liked, and you certainly couldn't drive them unless you were passed out as a mainline driver first. Now, people will no doubt have stories that they'd like to share about Howard and the Wolsztyn Experience, so I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to share mine. I went out to Poland in 2019 to film an episode of Steam Locos in Profile on the PKP OL 49262s. And when I was there, Wolsztyn had 2 operational steam engines, a pair of OL 49s. Number 69 was working the regular service 6 days a week, and number 59 was due to run to a festival that weekend. Now, when I arrived on a Sunday, number 69 was working fine, but number 59 was away in Warsaw having her wheels turned, and she was due back the following Tuesday. But she didn't come back until the following Thursday, minus all of the rods and valve gear. So on the Friday, Wolsztyn's team were frantically raising steam on number 59 and trying to reassemble her valve gear, as she was booked to run to her festival that evening. But when her time came, she wasn't ready, so Howard had to swap the rosters around, so number 69 took place of number 59. 69 would go down to the festival, and number 59 would work the following day's service out to Poznan. And you would not believe what happened next. On the Saturday morning, when number 59 had steam up, the driver went to put the engine into reverse to back her out the shed. But when he did, he opened the regulator slightly and the engine actually shot forward, shot the opposite direction and nearly crashed through the back of the shed. It turns out that whoever put the wheels back in had put them in the wrong way round. So all the gearing was back to front, the valves were out of time, the timing was all out. So the engine was failed there and then, and Howard had to help arrange a replacement diesel service. So those who had been booked to drive number 59 that day had to be compensated with another slot later in the year. Now, that sort of operation sounds like the sort of thing that would normally have to be run by a team of about half a dozen people, but this was mostly one bloke who was organising all of this, right at the last minute. It all sounds very ad hoc and chaotic, but that's just the sort of operation that Howard had to deal with. But he didn't just sit back and, delegate all of these problems to other people. He actually went out there himself and made sure that every participant was making the best of a bad situation. He was that tenacious. And credit where it's due to Howard, his brother Trevor, and their business partner Nigel Fitt, I could not sing their praises enough. They helped me out with all of the accommodation, they told me all of the best places to go for filming, all the best places to eat. They even organised a cab ride for me, despite the crews not speaking much English. Or, me speaking even less Polish for that matter. Now, one of the tragedies of Howard's passing was that he never lived to see all of his ambitions come to full fruition. You see, when I was out there having Polish coffee with the participants, he was reminiscing how he would love to get a British Express steam locomotive, preferably a Castle, he said, shipped out there so that he could send it down the main line between Warsaw and Berlin. And that's a line that's been cleared to run trains at 100 miles an hour. In the UK, locos are usually restricted by the size of their driving wheels, so a Castle having 6-foot 8.5-inch driving wheels is limited to run at 75 miles an hour. Now, Tornado was cleared to run at 90, and Bittern has also run at 90 in recent years, but so far these have been the exceptions. In Poland, it's the norm. The surviving PM36 Pacific has been known to push the ton in recent years on that very stretch of line. Part of the reason why Bill Parker's Great Western Small Prairie tank number 5521 went out to Poland in 2007 was to prove that a British steamer could run a successful tour of Europe. Now, granted, a Small Prairie is about half the size and capabilities of a Castle, so it's more manageable. But as water testing goes, it showed what could be done, and Howard was a firm believer in showing what could be done. Which, by the way, he helped to pay for that Small Prairie to go to Poland. At the end of my shoot, I actually pulled Howard to one side and asked him a bit of a sombre question. Did he envisage steam in Poland continuing after he had passed on? And before he got into details about it, he started by saying, well, it would be nice if it did. Now, that statement hasn't aged very well for reasons which I'll come to, but hearing him say that at the time showed just how tenacious he was. And railway preservation needs tenacious people. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I would love to die safe in the knowledge that, even though I've stopped running, steam engines will carry on. But in recent years, things have been a bit touch and go as to whether or not that's going to be the case. The combination of COVID, the Russian-Ukrainian war, the end of domestic coal mining, and the financial crisis have hit the UK's heritage steam scene quite hard lately. So much so that most places have had to get tougher on raising their prices, and big place names like the Severn Valley and Festiniog railways have had to rationalise their services for the year. The Severn Valley's management went on record this year saying that if they went back to a pre-COVID running schedule, they would be paying out more than £900,000 a year just in coal and diesel. And there's no way that visitor numbers would make that back, as well as everything else on top. I bring this up because there's a lot that's come up in the railway press recently about things looking bleak as of late. Now, people like Howard Jones looked in the face of bleakness in the early 90s, with Polish working steam looking like it was on its way out. But instead of moping around and thinking, oh, I don't see this being a thing in 2 years' time, he actually did something about it. And it's actions like these which, in their own small ways, help to bring people comfort and inspiration. Tin Dunn is forever describing railway architecture and heritage as nice things, not necessarily essential, but nice. And people find comfort in having nice things, things which can provide escapism from the drudge and dreads of the working world. But I would go as far as saying that nice things, like running steam engines, have brought in wider benefits in their own small ways. Because the Volston experience has pretty much kept up this nice thing for the last 27 years or so, rail fans from all over the world have been travelling to this one small former Soviet town in rural Poland. Now, there's this ongoing debate as to whether or not rail fans pay more than just generic tourists, and in many ways it's been proven that they don't necessarily. But in Volston, rail fans have still had to pay out for local accommodation, food in local restaurants, alcohol in local bars, things which the residents may not necessarily be able to afford. The cost of living in Poland is about 5 times less expensive than it is in the UK or America. And when I was out there, Howard told me that the average working wage in Poland was equivalent to about £500 a month. So by bringing in overseas rail fans to Volston, Howard, in his own small way, has managed to pump overseas levels of income into that small part of southwest Poland. Income which that area may not necessarily have received. Tragically though, it looks like the Volston Experience may be taken to Howard's grave after all, because earlier this year, the Volston Experience website published an open letter from Howard saying that they would cease altogether on the 31st of August 2023. The reason being that everyone involved is getting older, the drivers and firemen are all getting older, new crews aren't coming in to replace them, and poor communication and management from higher authorities means that there are currently no operating steam engines at the depot anymore. So unless a rich millionaire comes in and sweeps the whole operation off of its feet, this looks like this really is the end. But it's been touch and go for the last 20 years or so, hence why even when the Volston Experience was set up, people were saying, go now while you have the chance. And it's thanks really to the hard work of Howard and all of his colleagues and associates that people who couldn't go now had a chance to go much later on. So there we are. If you did the Volston Experience and you've got any stories you'd like to share of Howard Jones or the experience itself, then feel free to share them in the comments below, or in the pub, or in the mess room, or over a cup of tea, or, wherever you happen to be, because no doubt none of those memories would have been possible if it weren't for him. So, thank you, Howard, for providing such a great experience to so many thousands of people around the world. Rest peacefully.